All right. Welcome, Bronco Nation, to another exciting video, and one that is going to be a little bit different today because we are doing this live. So anybody watching this on recording, I'm sorry that you missed out. There's still going to be a great experience for you. We have tailored this video so that it will be great for live viewers and also for anybody watching it on the recorded end as well. So stick around all the way through to the end. We're still going to have the score prediction challenge and everything else like that. But for everybody who is with us here live, welcome. This is going to be a very exciting discussion. I have with me a fellow podcaster, a UNLV fan here, and Jason Kelly. He does a fantastic job with his own show, the Let's Run podcast, a UNLV focused podcast. It's on YouTube. It's also on the websites as well. So I'll put links to all of that in the description below so you guys can find him later. This is going to be a great preview. We're going to be talking Boise State versus UNLV. This is number 15 Boise State, 5-1, taking on a fellow 5-1 team in conference here in UNLV. The game is going to be Friday, not this Friday. So for anybody who's getting all excited about the game this weekend, remember, we are on a bye week. So this is why we're doing this, kind of a special preview, because we've got a little bit extra time before the next game. Boise State's next game will be the following Friday here, the 25th at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Central Time on CBS Sports Network. Obviously, UNLV has a big game this weekend versus Oregon State. So while the coaches and the players, they won't be watching this video because they'll be focused on the game ahead. Hopefully, UNLV fans can still get some enjoyment out of this because as fans, it's okay. It's okay to peek ahead. Nothing that we do really matters in that sense anyway. So Friday the 25th, 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time on CBS Sports Network. It'll be at UNLV, home game for UNLV. Boise State returning to UNLV for the first time since the Mountain West Championship game last year. And Boise State favored in this one, 64.4% chance of winning per ESPN's FPI. And then the Vegas line's not out at this point because we've still got, a week and a half until the game. So what I'm seeing on different sports betting websites is somewhere between a 2.5 and 5-point Boise State favorite, somewhere in that range. And I would probably expect it to probably stay that way through into the game. So a close game being predicted by the sports bettors out there. I know that all the UNLV fans, you guys are real into that. So that's very important for you that we include that. And then 64.4% chance of Boise State winning. So this is a big game. This is a huge game for both programs. Big game for Boise State, obviously, because every game's big for them on their quest to get to the CFP. But when you look at the rest of Boise State's schedule, Oregon State losing last week to Nevada. Now, it's a little bit of a better team with Jeff Choate there, but it's still Nevada. So, Oregon State going down, San Jose State losing to Colorado State. Like, there isn't really any other marquee matchups. This is the last one where Boise State can go out and hopefully, for my perspective here, get a win. And in that case, this is kind of that last big game for Boise State the rest of the season. Can you talk about this matchup from the UNLV perspective and what it means?
Yeah, I mean, this is our Super Bowl. I mean, it's everything to our program. We felt embarrassed by, we kind of fell apart. The wheels kind of fell off a little bit last year, and Boise came in and did a really great job, and Talon played great, and I thought the coaching staff and Hamden and all the guys did a great job last year. And so this is the game that we've had circled on our schedule, since it's been the game of our schedule all year, and it means everything to UNLV. I think it's the biggest game in program history, honestly, for us, which, considering our program, that's saying something, because there hasn't been a lot of big games up until the last couple of years. There were a couple of big games in the early 2000s and stuff. So definitely the biggest game since I've been kind of active in the UNLV sports world. So can't overstate how big it is. And it's big for the college football playoff. It's big for Group of Five implications. I don't think either team can really afford to lose this game, especially if Army or Navy is going to keep winning, because I don't know why. I guess Navy has the good win against Memphis, but so it cannot be overstated how big of a deal this is.
Oh, this is a huge deal for both programs, because I think it should be stated that UNLV still has a shot at the CFP. They still have a path. Now, their path is not necessarily as clear as Boise State. They need some outside things to happen for them as well. But if they beat Boise State, they get right up in there in that discussion with Navy, Army. I know Liberty's undefeated, but their schedule's as weak as Navy and Army's, but they got ranked, so who knows? For UNLV, this is that game that could determine whether or not they had that chance at the playoffs. And obviously, Boise State losing this game would probably deter them from that rule. And then obviously, it's not just the playoffs, but also conference. Let's not forget that first you got to get through the conference slate before you can get to the CFP. And this is probably a preview potentially of the Mountain West Championship game between these two programs right now. And so it's going to be a big deal whoever wins this game game will have that inside edge, not just for the CFP, but also momentum coming into the Mountain West Championship game. So everybody, before we continue further, I will just summarize what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to go through the series history between Boise State and UNLV. We'll talk about key players. I'll present the Boise State ones, and Jason will present the UNLV. We'll talk about keys to the game. This time, hey, UNLV fans watching, I always say that there's stuff for all fans watching to be involved in my preview videos, whether you're a Boise State fan or not. But today, there's especially something extra for you because we actually going to have Jason presenting UNLV keys to the game, not just Boise State. So we'll have 3 keys to the game for Boise State, 3 keys to the game for UNLV. And then we'll also summarize at the end and score predictions. And that brings us to the most important part of all of my preview videos, which are the score predictions. Now, anybody live, I want you to put your score predictions in. I'm going to save those. We're going to look at them at the end of the video. I want to have that discussion with you. However, if you want to participate in the score prediction contest where I bring up and shout out the person who got the closest score prediction in my review video, with the way that StreamYard works, it's not going to allow me to see the comments from the live feed afterwards. So if you're watching this live, throw your score predictions in now, but also once the video is over, make sure you go like it, but also put your score prediction. If you're watching this game on recording, you're totally fine. Go in and put your score predictions in right now, and the closest one, as always, will get shouted out in the next video. So give everybody a moment on the recording side to put those in, and everybody live to throw those in. And all right, we're back. Let's continue. So Boise State versus UNLV. This is not the first time that they're playing. They've been in the conference for a while together since 2011. And then they had a couple of games before that as well. Those earlier games went a little bit better for UNLV. They do have some wins against Boise State. Series history is 9-3. Boise State, obviously, the one with the 9 wins. But UNLV got some early punches in. 1972, Boise State and UNLV played. And Boise State won that first game 36-16. But then UNLV would win the next 2 matchups in a row, 73 and 74, 1973, 1974. UNLV would win both of them by less than 5 points both times. It was very close, both of those games, but UNLV would get the win. And then in 1975, Boise State would win 34-21 before UNLV took the next matchup in another close one, 26-31 in 1976. And then from 1977 all the way up until present date, I think everybody knows the history there. 7 wins by Boise State, and hopefully counting coming into next week here. All of the wins by Boise State in the series have been by 3 scores or more. So UNLV's won a few times, but each one has been by less than a possession. But every time Boise State's won, it's been at least since 1977 has been by 3 scores or more. And then, of course, in 2023, the last time these 2 teams met, where UNLV was actually, I believe, favored in that game at home for them, obviously having a much better season record-wise overall. Boise State came in and won big, 44-20 in the Mountain West Championship game. So, obviously, not a series that has favored UNLV. Do you have any games or memorable moments that have stuck out to you from this series history so far, Jason?
The pick 6 on Taylor Green last year in the championship was pretty fun, and then after that, it was not as fun. But that was probably the funnest moment of the year for us last year, and then it kind of all kind of crumbled after that. But I kind of shared with you earlier, I love Boise State. I lived in Boise. I went to all the games, so I have a big respect for Boise State athletics, despite our fans kind of chirping at each other a little bit. But I went to the Blue. When I lived there, I had season tickets, and when I was a kid, since UNLV was so bad for so long, I actually followed Boise State. So big deep respect for Boise State. I've always kind of I wouldn't obviously I say look up. I'm sure if anybody from UNLV was watching that, but I have, you kind of want to be good. When I was what, 14 when you guys were in your absolute, or 12 or something when you guys were in your absolute heyday. So falling in love with sports, I love this series, and I hope that we can kind of make our mark in it for the first time.
I have some strong memories from the Boise State series. I believe it was UNLV that we first premiered the blackout uniforms, the all black uniforms. And I believe that was maybe 2012, if my mind's serving me right. So that was a fun one, obviously. And then also one of the few games that I was able to go to, fly back to when I was in college, for Boise State was the Boise State versus UNLV game that was in 2016 or 2017 or something like that on the Blue. That was a game where Cedric Wilson almost had a punt return for a touchdown, and the punter got him right at the end, and there was a lot of exciting moments. So yeah, this is a series that has been pretty lopsided overall. I don't think it's ever been one of those ones where until last year, where you look on the schedule, go, I'm a little concerned about that game. But this is different. This is a completely different UNLV team. Obviously, I wouldn't say it's a completely different Boise State team because Boise State's always had the kind of elite status, top 25 strong players overall. Different looking, obviously, with a more heavy run focus. But this is a different UNLV team. They have a lot of really, really good players, which we're going to talk about here in a second, that are propelling them towards a chance at winning versus Boise State and a Mountain West Championship game potential title and even a CFP on the road. So let's get into looking at these key players for both teams. Of course, obviously, Boise State channel, we're going to start off with the Boise State team first. Running back for Boise State, obviously, is going to be the number one key player, Ashton Jeanty. You need Ashton Jeanty to have a huge game, and I think that goes without saying in every matchup that Boise State has. Now, the passing game has started to come on a little bit stronger. I'll talk about that when I get to my key plays of the game. But at the end of the, or keys to the game, but at the end of the day, it's the running game is what Boise State's offense is powered through. And Ashton Jeanty has been doing an incredible job. 1,248 yards rushing, 9.9 yard average, 17 touchdowns. Also added 9 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown last week versus Hawaii. Last week versus Hawaii was his worst performance of the season. If you're looking at average per yard, he still averaged over 7 yards per carry, and that was in a down week for him. And that kind of shows you the potential that he has. And I think there's even more potential that can come out of him here when we talk about the receiving game. That seemed to start to be maybe a little bit of a focus. Boise State went to him a few times versus UNLV. I believe he had 3 catches in that game. They went to him on a deep wheel that he just wasn't open on. But they are starting to try and emphasize that element as well. And if he can continue to unlock that, obviously last year, huge in the receiving game, 569 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns overall. It's a part of his game that hasn't gone away, just hasn't been needed so far this season. If he comes out and Boise State can start to throw the ball to him as well, it's going to continue to elevate that Heisman campaign. And I think there's a strong potential they might be trying to start emphasizing that a little bit more. And then key player number 2, if you saw the thumbnail, he was on the cover. It's Cameron Camper. Cameron Camper Boise State always has that number 1 wide receiver. Obviously, last year was McAllister. But with him transferring out, people were wondering who's going to be that number 1 wide receiver for Boise State. And Cam Camper was a name that some people did have on their radar, but he'd been injured, coming from Indiana. I think it said Rutgers in one of the videos, but I believe it is Indiana that he came from. Anyhow, they're basically the same program. Obviously Cam Camper coming down from the Big Ten school there, but injured and wasn't even clear if he was going to be able to start right off the bat with an injury coming through into fall camp. But he has exploded, and especially the last few games. So far this season, 25 receptions, 441 yards receiving, 17.6 yard average, and 4 touchdowns. He's really kind of been the rocket fuel of this passing game for Boise State, and definitely the player that Maddox Madsen looks to it in most key situations. And then the final key player for me, I'm going to shift to the defense here because I think that will be a big emphasis versus a UNLV offense that's very, very explosive with a very, very good quarterback. Another one transferred out, and we thought, okay, good, now it's an easy win. And I think they got stronger after that. So the nickel position is going to be very, very important to stopping a quarterback who can run and who can pass. A UNLV offense that's very built around the run, but the passing game is a key part of that. The nickel back kind of has to live in both of those worlds. And I think that Shea Oladipo, he's an incredible talent. I've loved him since he first came to Boise State. Love his family. He's a fantastic player. And coming into last season where he took on the nickel role, I think he really started to thrive in his natural position there. And so this season, the nickel role, he's been splitting that with Rodney Robinson, but he had a huge game last week, 2 sacks versus Hawaii. So far in the season, 26 tackles and 3 sacks overall. I think you could see him step up and have a huge game in this one as well. So before we move on to the UNLV key players, talking about the guys that you're going to be introducing, just what are your thoughts on some of these guys that we've thrown out here for Boise State?
Obviously, I don't really know what else I can say about Ashton Jeanty that hasn't been said already. I love seeing Boise State fans defending him when you see stupid stuff being said by Travis Hunter or whoever. And no disrespect to Travis Hunter, he's incredible. I think if anybody has a case, maybe it might be him, maybe. But I'm very supportive, and I think UNLV fans as a whole and the players are very supportive of Ashton Jeanty. There's a lot of respect there. There's not going to be any, we have 2 Ashton Jeantys on our roster, or the San Diego State running back that said he was better than Ashton. I don't think you're going to get any bulletin board material for the Rebels. Jet Thomas had a quote, publicly was talking to our starting running back the other week about how he looks up to Ashton Jeanty. So there's a lot of respect there. Obviously, I want UNLV to win this game. It would make me sad to hurt Ashton Jeanty's chances to win the Heisman, because I want him to win the Heisman. I do. I'm supporting him, and losing this game and not making, potentially losing out on the college football playoff would really hurt those chances probably. So lots of respect there. Really, really appreciate him as a player. I love the memes about him being like Michael Myers standing on the street, like standing in the backfield. It's hilarious to watch him in the backfield, just like, so big fan of him. Camper's been really impressive to me. Matson's been, because, I paid attention. Obviously, I paid attention to the Matson Green controversy last year. And I was like Team Madsen. Like, I was like, come on, Taylor sucks. Like, and I think that was more Avalos than anything. I think that Madsen just kind of was more. But I've been impressed by Madsen. If Madsen gets the chance, if UNLV will give Maddox Madsen the chance to win this game on his own. Like, UNLV will do that. They have done that. If you've seen how we've played, we're giving up like 60 pass attempts to teams like Syracuse and Utah State. Obviously, Genty is not going to be stopped, and he might still end up winning the game anyway. But if the Boise State coaching staff wanted to let Maddox Madsen throw 60 times, the UNLV defense would be more than obliged to let him do that. So I've been impressed by him. I don't think Boise State's going to do that. Obviously, they have too good of a player to do that. And then I'll speak a little bit more about the Boise State defense generally. I don't really know what to think. Like, I think they're good. Like, I think they're very good. I don't know if they're as good as their 15th ranking. I think their 15th ranking is more due to their offense than anything. I don't think they have a 15 ranked defense. But I don't really know that our defense is that good either. I really feel like this game will be a very good barometer test for kind of where these teams are, and especially UNLV. So yeah, those are kind of my impressions of your key players.
Well, talking about barometer test, UNLV has had on paper coming into the season, it looked like it was going to be a really, really tough, really, really strong season. And I'm not trying to necessarily discredit it. It's definitely better than some of those other programs out there, especially when we start talking about like Navy or Army, something like that. It's not down in that area. But UNLV's schedule has perhaps not been quite as tough as was expected. Houston, big win start the season, but then Houston's looked terrible. I think one win so far. Obviously, there was an FCS team in there as well, but then Kansas. Okay, two wins. Kansas.
They won on the road at TCU.
Okay, all right.
That Houston win's aging. I don't know about fine wine, but maybe like a cheap rosier or something.
Yeah, gas station wine or something like that. Yeah, Houston's got the 2 wins. It's Kansas then that's only got the 1 win so far this season throughout. And then Fresno State, though, I think that's a quality win, especially with the quarterback change up there and having to come in. Syracuse should have been a win. That was a win that was just stolen by horrible refereeing. And then Utah State, not that Utah State's a great team, but obviously that's kind of the schedule so far this season overall. And but for Boise State coming in, UNLV coming up against Boise State, this is going to be that biggest test of the year because Boise State's got that proven track record. Those other teams, the season will tell how good they end up being and how good those wins end up being for UNLV. But coming up against Boise State, again, they do have that solid defense, at least at the defensive line, front seven level. They have that offense that's been proven unstoppable so far, even against teams like Oregon at times. So for Boise State UNLV, this is a barometer test for both programs because I think Boise State will have a chance to continue to prove that maybe the improvements that we've seen so far are going to stick, especially on like special teams in that area. And then for UNLV, it's that chance overall to show exactly where you stand in the football landscape. And a close game versus Boise State could maybe do the same thing, even if it's a loss, like the close game versus Oregon for Boise State. I mean, it could potentially show that UNLV's at a level that they deserve their rest of their wins to be taken into greater account. So talking about those key players for UNLV that are going to be a big part of potentially keeping them in this game or potentially winning it, who you got for your top 3 key players for UNLV?
So the first name that has to be mentioned is Ricky White. And I don't mean this to disparage Ashton Genty at all. He is kind of, in terms of just leadership, like obviously not like necessarily in production, but in terms of like being like the focal point of our team and kind of the face of our team, I think Ricky White is kind of like that for us. Obviously receiving wise, our first quarterback, Matthew Sluka, who abandoned us and ended up making us better, could not get the ball to Ricky White. Like that was, if you want to know why he's gone from the program, I would say that is a big problem. There was some tension there. There were players that wanted our previous quarterback to be benched because he couldn't complete a forward pass, which is a big problem in college football if you can't complete a forward pass. And people saw Haji Malik Williams, who had been with the program for a long time, and specifically Ricky had been advocating for Haji Malik Williams just in the locker room and to the coaches and stuff. And so Ricky is our best player. He can get open. He's a dangerous downfield threat. He's good in the screen game. there's nothing in terms of a college football player that Ricky cannot do. And with 3 games at the beginning of the year where he basically, or 2 games, I should say, that he had no production at all because of Matthew Succa. He has 526 yards on the year. And that's still pretty good for a player that didn't really get any passes in 2 games.
Yeah.
And so love Ricky. The other great thing about Ricky is he's probably, I don't know that there's a better special teams player. like this is one thing I'll give. He's got 2 blocked punts this year. The guy is just an absolute fiend on special teams, which is, really great for him in terms of his pro prospects. You want to have a balance kind of so that you can be useful. And so Ricky will be a menace on special teams. We will try and block a punt. I don't know if James Ferguson Reynolds I don't know how his health is at this point, but UNLV is going to go for a blocked punt. They put all their starters in basically every single punt play, and they risk injuring them, and they go for a blocked punt every single time. So expect that, and Ricky White will be the focal point of that. So he is number 1 for the Rebels. Number 2, I'm going to say, is Jackson Woodard, who was an all-league, and if yes, that was a very painful game, Mr. Tostes. But Jackson Woodard, who is tied for 2nd place along with Jalen Catalon, who is also in our team, for interceptions on the year in the country by an individual player. He is our middle linebacker, the quarterback of our roster, of our defense, you should say. Really, the guy looks like he just drank 15 Bang energy drinks before each game. He comes out like a madman. Really good dude, really respectful, really, really, really happy with him. He will be trying to, basically point out where Genty is going to be running. He's going to be kind of yelling at his guys, keeping his defense in form. On the inside, we're pretty good. It's on the outside where we have some vulnerabilities. And Jackson Woodard is the reason to reach some national recognition this year, because the number of tackles, interceptions, just overall stats that the guy racks up is just insane. So Jackson Woodard, unbelievable year so far. He's going to be the person that tries to keep Ashton Genty under a cajillion yards. And I think he will do about as good of a job as anybody, at least in the group of 5, could do. I think that you could probably say that he will do as good of a job as anybody in this level.
Is he the green dot?
Yeah.
Does he have the headset?
Uh-huh.
He's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's a captain. Media days. Obviously, we didn't really have a quarterback back then, but sorry. As much Matthew Sluka shade as I can throw, I kind of want to. So he's the captain for sure, and our leader. The third player that I want to talk about, and I thought about talking about our quarterback because Hodges really come in and stepped up, and I think played as well as anybody in the conference. Honestly, in his 3 games that he's played for us. But I wanted to talk about Jacob DeJesus. DeJesus is our punt returner. He's our slot receiver. We use him on jet sweeps. He kind of is the catalyst that makes the go. And if you see a game where Jacob DeJesus is involved, it means that our offense is firing on all cylinders. He's had an okay year so far, a couple of touchdowns. But I've been a little disappointed just in terms of and we've had a few blowout games. I was disappointed with him in the Syracuse game. We've had some blowout games where he didn't really open the playbook a ton. But early on in the season, it kind of looked like he was primed for a breakout year. There's going to be some trickery with him, whether it be him coming across for a jet sweep, like I said, or just coming in through the slot and using Ricky as a bit of a decoy. And so I would look to see, watch Jacob DeJesus on the field. He's a little tiny guy. He's like 5'7", but he's built like a little mini fridge, and I love watching him play. So those would be my 3 key players. I just tried not to pick the quarterback there. So There you go.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about your key players here before we move on to the keys to the game. For anybody watching live, I would love to know your thoughts on key players for this matchup. And hey, if you're watching the recording, put it in the comments as well. I try to get through every single comment on all of my recorded videos afterwards, have the discussion with all of you. But just key players, Boise State or for UNLV. I'll throw some of those comments up here on the screen as well. But talking about those UNLV guys, you threw out at least two of the same guys that I was going to go to for if I was doing this by myself anyway. Ricky White and Jake DeJesus. I'd agree with DeJesus. I kind of expected him to have I'm going to say I didn't expect him to have the same level of year as Horton is who I was going to throw out for Colorado State, because I didn't expect the quarterback play to be as good. But then with the quarterback play kind of stepping up there, especially with Williams taking over, I kind of expected it to be maybe a little bit more explosive, more of a primary target versus Ricky White stepping up as that main guy. But the main area where I've been, I wouldn't say disappointed, but he comes into the season as the Mountain West preseason special teams player of the year, is in the return game. It's not like he's been terrible. 8 punts return, 10.3 yard average. That's totally good. Fine. There's nothing wrong with that number at all. Long of 23. But I mean, last year he was a primary in the punt return and kick return game. He had a long of 96 for I think it was a touchdown or close to a touchdown there in 2023. So just kind of stepping off the not being a primary threat there. Is there a reason he was taken off of the kick return for UNLV? And have you just seen maybe just not as good blocking, or is it just maybe you don't see him as being explosive this year in the return game? Kind of what's kind of held him back?
If you want my honest view, it's because we haven't received very many punts. like if you watch that Syracuse game, I mean, there were 8 straight third down completions of more than 5 yards in that Syracuse game. And then in the Houston game, again, I think we allowed other guys to get, early on in the game. I was disappointed in him a little bit in the Kansas game, in his return game, but his special teams, his lack of special teams production, I think is honestly more due to our defense just not getting off the field. And the games that we have won have been absolute blowouts. And so there hasn't been a huge, I guess besides the Kansas game, there hasn't been a huge incentive to kind of risk him. And so I think he's been playing a little more conservatively, especially if the game's a blowout. And then in the Syracuse game, we just didn't force a punt because we can get into that if you want. But a very good quarterback on their end and some very soft coverage on our end is kind of the way that I would put it.
Well, before we move on to the keys of the game, I do want to get your thoughts on just Williams taking over here as the quarterback, because obviously you didn't list him as one of the key players there. Because there are some other great names that need to be gone into for UNLV's side, so I definitely agree with who you threw out. But just looking at Malik Williams there, Malik Williams, and comparing him to Sluka, because they've now both played 3 games too, so you have a 3-game comparison for both. And honestly, it's not that far of a difference between the two, because Sluka had an FCS team thrown in 2 mediocre Power 5s or group of Power 4s. And then Williams has had 2 really solid group of 5 level programs and another just normal group of 5 as well. So looking at the comparison between the 3 there, Williams so far in his 3 games has had 642 yards passing for 77 completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's been sacked 6 times, but he's also ran the ball for 325 yards, 6.8 yard average, and 2 touchdowns. You compare that to Sluka and what he was doing, and he kind of took the college football world by storm, really kind of got a big opinion of himself because of that, and he looked good doing it, but it doesn't compare at all. It doesn't compare at any of these levels to what Williams has done. Sluka had 318 yards, so half the passing yards that Williams has had. He had a 43.8% completion percentage. He had 3 less touchdowns, same amount of picks, and then he had 253 yards rushing and a touchdown. So he's not even competing in the rushing category compared to Williams. What happened? Why was this guy even on the bench? I mean, so UNLV loses their top quarterback and they become better. Can you kind of explain that to us? Kind of explain what happened?
So if you want my honest opinion, so here's what happened. There was probably some NIL discussion between Matthew Sluka and our assistant coach, Brennan Marion. And we talked, but before all this happened, I was very grateful to have you come on my show and talk. That was all about conference realignment, but this blew up like immediately after. Everything went to absolute shiz. Sluka was probably promised some, I don't know, I don't want to say promise because that's a legal term, was maybe given some possible I guess promise is the word I have to use, but not legal promise of some NIL stuff. I know he was promised the starting role because you can do that. And he had an incredible FCS career, Matthew Sluka, like an unbelievable, the stats that he was racking up in the FCS level. And I think that Brendan Marion kind of saw him. And we weren't even supposed to get Sluka originally. You know, we got Hodge Malik Williams before we got Matthew Sluka recruited. And so there was not, I feel like he was kind of seen as a double down on Brendan Marion's system. And he was promised a starting role and maybe some NIL. And he came here and it was working. He was winning, but he wasn't getting whatever NIL he felt like he was promised. His agent was a complete doo-doo head, not getting things in writing, not being registered in the state of Nevada, not communicating well with the NIL collective. All those things were, really indicative of a lack of professionalism, and which, I don't think these people are professional. Should be professionals anyway, but that's neither here nor there. And so he was starting because he was promised a starting role, and we were winning. And so the coaches didn't want to take his starting job away from him, but the locker room and especially Ricky White was kind of turning against him. And so I think he said, if I'm going to be here, I got to get paid. I got to get the money that I feel like that I'm deserved here, because the things are not going great here. And I could stay, but I feel like we're going to lose because the way that we won that Kansas game, and I stand by the Kansas game being a decent win, because that team has a ton of talent. They just haven't been able to win. They've been up by 7 in every single fourth quarter they've played. Sure. It's been ridiculous that they haven't been able to finish these games. I root for them every week. I'm almost like, Jayhawks, come on, guys, please.
You and BJ Rains, right there rooting for Kansas.
Yeah, BJ. I forget BJ. Anyway, Sluka kind of came up, said, "Hey, give me my money." And Barry Odom said, "No, and you're not even worth it anyway." And Hodge Malik Williams coming on as the starter was kind of seen as finally, oh my gosh, Brendan should not have promised this guy the starting role. And the UNLV fans are trying, they either don't talk about him or they talk about how he is an idiot who probably, it's not super positive. And I feel bad for him because I don't really blame him. I blame our assistant coach and I blame his agents. I don't really think it's his fault at all, and I wish him the absolute best. I think UNLV would have been fine with him as the starting quarterback throughout the season, but we definitely have the right guy. Sluka Doncic was great, but we are grateful to have the Hodge Mahal, as we call Hodge Malik Williams.
Well, and just to kind of clarify, because I made a little misspeak earlier comparing these two guys. Obviously, Williams has played a Power 4 program in Syracuse, so you have 2 Group of 5 and a Power 5, and versus Sluka, who was 2 Power 4s and then an FCS team. And so what Williams has been able to do coming on, even with maybe a schedule that's gotten tougher since he's taken over, has been absolutely incredible. And so let's get into the keys to the game here, because part of the keys to the game, just kind of give you a little sneak peek ahead, one of them is going to be trying to stop this guy. But for keys to the game here for Boise State versus UNLV, and the way we're going to do this is we're going to each present a key to the game. We'll discuss it, and then we'll move on to the next one. And then Bronco Nation, want to hear your thoughts as well, either on the keys to the game or UNLV fans, you have Rebel Nation that's watching as well. But either on the keys to the game that we are presenting, those thoughts on the discussion that we're having, or just your own keys as well. And I'll be throwing that at the end of this keys to the game discussion. I'll be throwing some of those up as well. So for just looking at keys to the game right off the bat, first, number one, we'll start with Boise State again. And we kind of touched on it already with DeJesus, but special teams. And that's just the key right there. I'm not going to go any kind of fancy verbiage on what needs to happen. It's just special teams have got to be solid in this game. When you start playing teams that are approaching closer to peer level, and I think that UNLV is moving in that direction this season with the record that they have. They should be a top 25 team. They should have won that Syracuse game, the talent on this roster. It all becomes games of inches. And the biggest influencer overall, that unseen behind the scenes kind of factor, oftentimes is the special teams. Whether it comes down to a game-winning field goal or not, oftentimes the key factor in these close wins is the special teams. And I think for a Boise State special teams unit that in a lot of ways has had some very strong moments, but has also been plagued by a lot of things. This is a got to have it moment for the special teams overall. Obviously, DeJesus, he can have a major impact if he wants to on this game. And that is going to be definitely a factor, because Boise State, our one loss versus Oregon, it wasn't lost defensively. We held them to 23 points. It wasn't lost offensively. We scored, was it 35? We lost that game special teams. We gave up 2 touchdowns on special teams, a punt return, which would then be in DeJesus's court, and then also a kick return. and UNLV has had a long kick return as well. So this is definitely an area where Boise State's got to be tough and stand up strong. I think we saw a massive improvement in that kick return coverage versus Hawaii. That's really been a plague for Boise State, not just versus Oregon, but just throughout this whole season. It's not really what we expected to see. With obviously there was the special team supposed to get a boost, right? With a Power 4 coordinator coming over from Penn State, we expected to see a boost there, and we just hadn't seen that so far this year. But Hawaii, they've got some dangerous guys back there, and Boise State looked really, really good. 8.5-yard average on the 2 kick returns that Hawaii had in a long of 11. Boise State really started to seem to figure some things out on the return game. I know that game wasn't necessarily what Boise State fans wanted to see overall. 28-7, close game. There was a lot of heart pulsing moments throughout that matchup. But the biggest positive that I took away from that game, and there were a lot of good positives, but the biggest one was I thought the special teams really started to improve. I thought that punting, Taryn Sheaves, who's come on to replace James Ferguson Reynolds with the injury there, he's obviously first punt of his career wasn't great at Boise State. First punt of his career versus Boise State wasn't great, but then after that, he's really started to improve, and I thought he started to seem to come into his own. He had a 65+ yard punt versus Hawaii that just didn't count because he got a roughing the punter and actually extended the drive because of that. But if it had stood, he punted from basically his end zone all the way to the Hawaii 25-26. That would have been a monster punt. And he has the leg. Boise State is just doing an incredible job of recruiting punters recently. And then who knows? James Ferguson Reynolds might be back on this one. I know that he was optimistic about his return. I don't have any insider information there, but I don't think there was ever anything released that said this was season ending. Come off of 2 weeks with the bye week. Maybe he's able to come back in and play. And obviously, Jonah Dalmas, 2 of 2 last week, was a big factor in that win, kind of keeping that momentum going when drives were stalling out. 2 of 2 in the red zone. Only had a long of 48, but he might be having to test his leg strength here versus UNLV, because I don't think we're going to end every drive in the end zone here, and UNLV might stop us somewhere just outside, and we'll have to test that leg with Jonah Dalmas this season. So key number 1 for me, special teams. I think we got some good returners as well that are having flashes. Obviously, Dylan Riley, that long kick return. Cooper Jones had some strong moments. He's a gutsy kick punt returner, just like his uncle Tim Gilligan. So he goes out there and plays strong and hard every year, every single matchup. He just hasn't necessarily had the breakout game, and maybe that's an opportunity versus UNLV. Either way, special teams I think are going to be a key to winning this one, and Boise State's going to need to definitely continue those trends of improving on their kick return coverage, and then also just maintain their elite level in punting and kicking overall. Any thoughts on key number 1 here for Boise State? Or we can just move into UNLV's key number 1 for you.
I'll just say that special teams are our strength. They are. That is, we haven't had as many flashy plays perhaps as you think, but Barry Odom, I don't know what he did, because we were one of the worst special teams programs for half of a century. But ever since he got here, special teams has become just a really big cornerstone for our program. And gaining inches, gaining little advantages on special teams has been huge. So I feel very good about special teams. I think that they will not lose UNLV the game. Watch. I mean, you don't want to jinx your guys or anything, but I do not think special teams will lose UNLV the game. And I think that they will be a net benefit for UNLV. And hopefully, we can break through and get a big play, but you never know. So key number 1 for UNLV.
Yeah, go ahead.
So key number 1 for UNLV is 2 interceptions. Specifically 2 interceptions. UNLV has had one of the best turnover forcing defenses in the country. You look at our defense and you see kind of what we did against Syracuse. You see maybe the second half against Utah State, although I don't really put much stock into that. The game was pretty much over already. And I don't think Utah State really I think they had a lot. I don't think they really wanted to get embarrassed that bad in front of their home fans. So I'll give them some credit. They fought back and whatever. It was fine. But I don't put a lot of stock into that second half. And there was a lot of not starters out there as well. But Jalen Catalon, Jackson Woodard, Tony Grimes, we have an improved secondary, especially in the middle of the field this year. And it's going to take 2 turnovers. The reason why I said 2 interceptions, I don't know that Gentry's going to have a fumble or anything. And I think that Madsen will have to throw a risky pass once or twice in this game. That's just kind of the ebbs and flows of college football. You have to throw one every once in a while. At least that's the way it seems in every game. And I think that Jalen Catalon Jackson Woodard, these guys have been absolute ball hawks, 4 interceptions each on the year. And if UNLV wants to win this game, they're not going to be able to stop the drives organically alone. The defense that's not going to be the only way the defense can get stops is by 3 and outs or forcing punts. They're going to have to do it through the turnover battle. So 2 interceptions is key number 1, and it's a strength, and I think they can do it, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, so just looking at UNLV's stats so far this season, 13 interceptions overall for UNLV. That's a very strong number. They are coming up against a Boise State quarterback who its strengths and weaknesses here. I mean, like if you look at statistically overall, only the 2 picks, and he does a really good job of managing and not most times not putting the ball into harm's way, either taking the run or throwing it away or just putting it where his guy is going to be the primary guy to go get it. But he's also had some moments where his haters will love to point out where he's had a lot of near picks this year. And obviously that's not a stat that's tracked and for a meaningful reason because it wasn't an interception. There's factors that go into that. But obviously Madsen, I mean, just last week versus Hawaii, threw it right into the Hawaii defender's hands. I mean, it hit him in both hands. I think it was a linebacker at that point. So maybe that's why he didn't catch it. But he missed it, batted it forward. Ashton Jeanty actually caught it off of the rebound there and actually almost got a first down. It's one of the craziest plays. Ashton Jeanty's had a lot of crazy plays. But I mean, as far as heads up plays go, that was one of the craziest I've seen this so far this season. So, I mean, at UNLV, opportunistic defense, very good defense, and one that I think that they will give that opportunity to go to the air. And especially if you start getting some momentum and that confidence picks up and Madsen gets to a point where he hasn't necessarily been so far this season, where he's starting to have that high level of confidence in the passing game, seeing things work out. Maybe he does get a little riskier with it and throws one into harm's way. His 2 picks so far this season, one versus Georgia Southern was just a bad decision, just right there across the middle of the field. And then the other one versus Washington State, which was a deflected pass on a somewhat questionable call, not as questionable as I think fans made it seem. Tight end was open for a moment, and the defender faded back into the route, but off of a tipped play that ended up becoming a pick on that one as well. But overall, he's done a really strong job. So, yeah, I think that when you talk about what Max Madsen brings to the table, he doesn't bring necessarily the elite level passing game. You're not typically going to see a ton of 60-yard touchdown passes out of, Sports Center top 10 highlight reels out of him. But what you are going to see is that game management side of things. That's been his strength. And so if UNLV can expose that, what has been a strength for him, that could potentially kind of undermine this running game, this offense overall. So I think that is a good key to the game for UNLV. If they can get those 2 picks, be the first time this season anyone's gotten multiple interceptions versus Boise State. Boise State, especially the run-heavy offense, might have trouble digging themselves out of that hole. So key number 2 here for Boise State, and it's actually going to tie pretty well into what you've just discussed here, because key number 2 for Boise State that I have is trust Madsen's arm. I think that obviously the running game is the emphasis for Boise State. I'm not saying that we should go out here and be air raid style, throw it all over the field on every single pass. I'm not saying anything like that. But I think there does become a tendency when you're facing off against an opponent that is a tough one, that you're not sure if you're going to be able to win, to kind of just focus in on that one thing that you do well. And I don't want Boise State to do that versus UNLV, because one, I don't think that's going to be effective. I think they tried a little bit versus Hawaii with that. Hawaii shut them down. They had to go to the passing game. But I also think that UNLV is going to give them opportunities through the air. I mean, when you talk about UNLV's defense, they are great against the run. They are 99 yards per game. They're top 20 in the country, top 10 in the country. They're 9th overall in stopping the run. But the passing game is not something that they have been, as you pointed out already, is not something they've been strong stopping. 286.7 yards per game through the air so far this season. There's going to be opportunities. So first off, I think the weakness is there to exploit. I don't think the UNLV is going to be able to shut down Jeanty. I think that the running game is still going to be effective, but the passing game has opportunities. And then the other element here is that I think Boise State's passing game has momentum. If you look at the last 2 games for Boise State, Maddox Madsen has been just the last 2 games, which I think is when you've seen his confidence start to rise, really start to see him and the passing game get into a point of cohesion here. In the last 2 games for Max Madsen, 38 out of 50, 473 yards, 5 touchdowns, 76% completion percentage, and no picks. And a big part of that has been other weapons stepping up in the passing game here for Boise State. Obviously, Cam Camper has been strong throughout this whole season, but he's had a really good last couple of games, 12 receptions for 170 yards. Chase Penry stepping in after Latrell Caples was injured there for a little bit. He's been a huge factor. 7 receptions for 100 yards in the last 2 games for him. Obviously, you have Matt Lauder, everything that he's done. The last 2 games been a little quieter, 6 receptions for 49 yards. But if you look at his overall last 4 matchups coming into this game, 17 receptions for 276 yards. And so I think that, and then obviously Bolt with his 3 TDs in the last 2 games. Strawn's stepping up, Capel's continuing to be part of it. Marshall potentially coming back from injury. The reason that Boise State's passing game has started to really flourish is that the chemistry has finally been built. I pointed this out early on in the season when fans were complaining about the passing game, but it's really hard when you're going through camp in a quarterback competition to develop that chemistry, because every single practice, not that it's always 50-50, but you're having to split reps, and wide receivers are catching balls from both sets of players, and you're not getting to build that solid lockdown chemistry between just you and a couple of guys, or the wide receiver unit as a whole. And so I really wasn't that surprised, especially considering that we thought their game was going to be mostly the run game anyway. But I really haven't been that surprised to see early on in the season the passing game not necessarily step up to the level that maybe we even saw last year. And so, but this, now that Maddox Madsen has had, a full 6 games as the primary starter, you're starting to see some players step up that are go-to threats that the defense has to take into account. And I think that's the biggest point overall, is that Ashton Jeanty has been incredible so far this season when he's been the only point of offense that the defense has really had to account for. Imagine how much more explosive he's going to be going forward now that the passing game has proven itself as a threat you have to take into account. And we saw that last week. Early on, Hawaii selling out, stopping the run. Boise State goes to the air, whether it be on 4th down or 2nd and long, negative 4-yard loss for Ashton Jeanty. Boise State picks it up the next play through the passing game. And then you start seeing Ashton Jeanty come on really strong in the second half, 100-plus yards rushing in the second half, because the Hawaii defense had to back off a little bit to take into account for the passing game. And so key number 2 here, coming up against UNLV offense, that is going to be strong. They're going to be really good. They're not going to be like Hawaii. I think UNLV is going to put a lot more points into the end zone. You need to be able to match them offensively. And a UNLV defense, I think, is going to be stronger. Statistically, already this season, they have been stronger than what Hawaii has put up. So this is a good UNLV defense, especially versus the run. You're going to need your passing game to be a big part of it. And so I think trusting Maddox Madsen's arm, which has been a big part so far last game, that was one of the biggest takeaways besides the improvements in the return game, was the trust that the coaches put into Maddox Madsen. 3 4th downs and short, one of them in your own side of the territory. You got Ashton Jeanty back there. You could just run it up the middle, and instead they chose to throw the ball. I think part of that was 2 parts. One, to instill confidence in Maddox Madsen, show him that he is trusted by this offense, and then build his confidence going into the future matches. But also, at any time there's a 4th and 1 or a 3rd and 1 is short, UNLV or any other team isn't going to be able to just bow up and guarantee that it's going to be a run. They have to be prepared to stop the pass as well. And again, that's just going to only improve and increase things for Ashton Jeanty there. So number 2 for me, trust Madsen's arm. I think the passing game is going to be a huge part of getting this win.
Yeah, I'll just say to that like UNLV has done it's been a really, I've never seen a college football team do what they've done defensively this year. They are giving every single team that they play like 5-10 yards of space off the line of scrimmage. They're giving them a ton of room. Maddox Madsen is going to be able to get those 7-yard kind of chunk plays. Like it's going to happen. Like the defense is built to give those up. And the trade-off there is they're basically just kind of playing this weird, like prevent style defense where they're willing to give up that 7-yard pass. They're just trying to keep players in front of them, and they're trying to kind of sell out to stop other teams from running on them. Everything's got to be in front, and they have not changed that defensive strategy. There's been no adjustment of it. There's been, maybe tweaks here and there on the side. But, they are willing to give up that 7-8 yard pass so long as they can keep players in front of them. And I've never seen it. I mean, obviously, this is not a new strategy. Teams have been doing this for a long time, and they're not doing it in a way that I saw BYU do it a lot of times, because I know that, Boise State's got a lot of experience with my alma mater, BYU, where they would kind of drop 8. They're still trying to rush guys, but they're almost just keeping their secondaries on the corner and on the outside very far away from their players. And so that they're trying to use that to contain edge. And really, I think if Dirk Cutter wants to kind of have a masterclass performance, like I think that, the Syracuse offensive coordinator did against us as well, like I think he's going to be able to do that. And this leads up to my, and it's a game that we're playing. It's a risk that we're taking. And this kind of leads perfectly into my second point. If you're going to make that risk, if we're going to give Maddox Madsen a chance to have probably his best game ever, which I think that is not something that's unlikely here. I think he could have his best game ever. I'm going to put a number on the number of yards that I want them to try and stop Ashton Genty. I understand that the number is arbitrary. Before anybody tries to clip this and say, "Oh, he hit over the number is 150," which, like, that is not a disrespectful number. Now, it's clearly less than he is capable of doing. He could run for 300 yards. And if he runs for 155, that's a total success for me. If he runs for 160, that's a total success for me. It's just kind of a ballpark number that I hope that we can do. And if we're going to play this kind of prevent style defense and let Maddox Matson have room to throw on the outside, that has to be the number. I don't think that that would be a shootout number too. I don't think that would be a low scoring game if Maddox Matson threw for 400 yards and Ashton Genty ran for 150 yards. Don't think that's going to be a low scoring game. But I think that's kind of the goal. And this defense is set up to try and do that, to try and limit his plays to 5 to 7 yard runs instead of the slam dunk, grand slam runs that he's doing every single time he touches the ball in the first play of the game. And so that's kind of the goal. It's 150 yards. I think it's possible. I would probably pick the over on that. But you never know. I mean, you don't want to bet against the guy. He's incredible. I think they should have a goal. I mean, it's dumb to say, "Oh, well, I guess we'll just see what he runs for." And I think it'd be stupid for them to have that approach too. And so, I'm sure the coaching staff doesn't put a number on it like I do, but I think that if UNLV wins this game, it's going to be because it's around 150 yards and it's not around 220 yards.
150 yards is a very ambitious goal. Would be the first team, Ashton Genty, playing 2 halves of football, and even one of them playing, actually both of them playing more than just a half of football. I've been able to do. I get what you're saying, but not nailing it down to that exact. But just basically, the overall point is limit his effectiveness. Something similar to what Hawaii did. I'm assuming. You only allow the one long breakout run, and you hold him to 7 yards or something or less a carry. Is that kind of what you're shooting for here?
Yeah, like if we did exactly what Hawaii did, I would be okay with that performance. Even if it was over 200 yards, if we were just limiting that 80-yard breaker where the Boise State offense was getting, even if he only has one of those, I'll be, it just can't be 2 or 3, because he's gonna explode. Like, he's gonna have his moment. He's too good of a player. He's the best player in the country. He's gonna have his moment, and so I'm sure that nobody would like me saying a number, but that's kind of a generalized feeling that I have as an individual fan that has absolutely nothing to do with the team.
Yeah, well, I feel like honestly, a lot of people in Vegas would be pretty upset with you if he does end up rushing for 150 yards. Vegas, UNLV adding extra seats in their stadium right now, and that's not because they're coming out to see Hajj Malik Williams. It's the Ashton Genty machine out there, and Vegas loves a winner. And so I think the 150 ambitious goal. I think every defense that has to face Ashton Genty and Boise State will be looking at what Hawaii did. I think they're going to be studying that tape. They're going to be seeing if they can replicate. It's tough to change your defense on a dime, and I think Hawaii had a very specific system that melded well against what Boise State did. I know Coach Sanford was pointing out in his game review that Hawaii did a great job of just shutting down the edges there, so he wasn't able to have those long breakout outside runs. He even stopped him -4-yard loss on an outside run. So I think that UNLV will try to do that, try to replicate that. We'll have to see if it ends up working out there. I think that it's going to be, especially Ashton Genty coming back from last week, where I don't think he felt like he had a great game. I think you look at his performance overall, any NFL GM would just seeing that game tape, and maybe even watching that game tape might be his best game tape of the season. I mean, he didn't have a ton of breakout yards, but he got 4+ yards on pretty much every single carry. His pass blocking was incredible. He showed his talents in the wide receiving game. I thought tape-wise, consistency-wise, it was one of his best tape games of the year as far as a draft consensus goes. So I know that, but even him, I think he's feeling like he didn't have the best performance. He's going to be coming in against UNLV in Vegas. Obviously, all the lights on him. Friday night game, maybe increased viewership. I think Genty shines the lights shown brightest on him, and so I don't expect him to have that number overall. But I do agree, if we're talking about keys of the game for UNLV winning, and if they want to get that win, limiting Ashton Genty somehow, forcing Boise State to the air that their offense just isn't built for. That's not their primary focus. and then hoping, building off that first key, the 2 turnovers. I think those blend in well together for UNLV. All right, key number 3 here, before we hear the third and final key for UNLV. Third and final key for Boise State is also a defensive one for me, is don't over-focus on any one element of Williams. You've heard me in other game previews here talking about the quarterbacks that Boise State have faced. I've said, just shut down this element of his game, force him into this other element, and you'll win. For instance, Dylan Gabriel, my folks was, bring the blitz, stop that arm, stop him from passing on you. He's not going to be able to beat you consistently on the ground. And then looking at Washington State's quarterback, Mateer, I said, if you can shut down the ground game, he's not going to be able to beat you with his arm. He's too inconsistent. He'll make mistakes. He's not going to have the momentum. I don't think you can do that strategy with Williams. If you focus on stopping him on the ground, he is going to kill you through the air. And if you try and focus on shutting him down in the passing game, he's going to kill you with his legs. And so Williams is, I'm not going to say he's the best quarterback that Boise State has faced so far this season, but he's definitely one of the top quarterbacks, and he's only getting stronger. He's only improving. This is his fifth game afterward, because he'll have Oregon State this week. So they hit 5 games in. He's going to be should be, if you look at quarterback progression, he should be better than what we've seen so far. And I think that should scare Boise State fans a little bit looking at this matchup. And so for Boise State on this one, this is a game where you just have to take the body blows, quickly recover, and just have that bend but don't break mentality. Boise State's done a great job so far this season. Like, just even last week versus Hawaii. I mean, Hawaii had 270 plus yards passing. It seemed at times like we couldn't stop that passing game at all, no matter what we did, if we backed into coverage or if we backed into, or we brought the blitz. But only 7 points because Boise State did stop them, even though it didn't feel like we were. Big part of that was the sacks. Big part of that was the pass deflections. 8 pass deflections in that game, highest number so far this season. But Boise State's had that great bend but don't break mentality. There's a lot. I talked about that win versus Hawaii being gutsy. This is a very, very gutsy defense. It's a defense that has a very strong mentality. It's hard to break them. Again, they give up that big play, but then they're ready the next down. It's that just next play mentality. They don't allow the offense to pick up momentum. It might seem like, all right, Washington State's on a drive here. They've had a big play, and then 3 or 4 downs later, they're having to punt the ball because Boise State doesn't break mentally and is able to continue to play that next down. And so for Boise State on this game, I think that there's going to be a mixed balance potential here. Sometimes you'll try to sell out to stop that run for Williams. Sometimes you'll be backing up into coverage. And this is that opportunity for Boise State a defense, secondary of course, but defense overall that has struggled to appear consistent. This is that opportunity to finally present a completely balanced effect. And I think to have a dominant win versus UNLV here, Boise State's defense will need to finally present a strong, balanced effect overall on both the ability to stop the pass and ability to stop the run as well. So key number 3 here, and I know it's kind of a little bit basic, but just don't over-focus in on any one element. Williams can beat you both ways. Just got to present a defense that allows the big play, maybe, but doesn't allow the touchdown overall.
Think that's totally fair. Not a ton to add on that, just because I think that's just really balanced, good coverage and good analysis there. I guess I'll just go into my final key of the game, which is pretty simple. When I was thinking about what my keys wanted to be here, and I'm glad I did this before my own preview, because I feel like this will give me a really good chance to give the best stuff to UNLV fans that I can possibly give. I wanted to pick 3 things that if UNLV did all 3, they would win the game. And the third one is outrush Boise State as a team. Not, obviously not just Astringenti, but like as a team, like it's outrush them. It's have more rushing yards in total than Boise State. Now, that's a little bit of a difficult thing because maybe Ricky White gets a lot of offense and you don't end up getting as many rushing yards as well. But UNLV is kind of a rush by committee. Every single person runs. Jacob DeJesus runs. Even Ricky White runs sometimes. I've seen that before. Every player runs. Kylan James, Greg Burrell. These guys are all capable of rushing. And I think that UNLV, and when I say outrush Boise State, I mean control the game on the ground more. If you watch that Syracuse game, UNLV was scoring in like 90 seconds every time they touched the ball. And our exhausted defense was just constantly on the field getting picked apart. And so, if UNLV is going to win this game, they have to control the rushing game. That doesn't mean have any player that comes anywhere near Astringenti. That means as a collective unit, control the ground game. And I know that's generic, but I feel like it is really the only way that UNLV wins this game. And it's if they have a balanced rushing attack that at least matches what Boise State's going to bring.
If you look at that Hawaii game, and again, I think that was the closest. I think that besides, of course, the Oregon matchup, but I think that was the closest that any team has come to truly stopping and beating Boise State. And it was a game that I was very worried about at times. And a big part of that was that Hawaii, yeah, pass heavy, but they controlled the clock. That was why that game was so close. That's why Boise State scored so little, and why Hawaii had a lot of opportunities in that matchup. Boise State did win the time of possession, because I think right there at the end, Hawaii kind of was forced into a little bit of a desperation kind of moments, and Boise State had this opportunity to just drive it down. But overall, 32 minutes by Boise State, but Hawaii, 27 minutes and 53 seconds. I mean, almost splitting it 50-50 right there, just a few minutes off. And so I agree. I think if UNLV wants to win this game, it's not going to come from lightning quick drives where your defense is out there having to take on Ashton Jeanty for extended periods of time every single drive. I think you're going to have to see a little bit of a service academy effect here. And I'm not saying that they need to run the option, but the reason that those academy teams are so hard to play is because they run, and they control the clock. And by the time your offense gets back on the field, they may have had a great drive the drive before, but now it's 7 minutes since they were last touching the field, and they're cold and they're a little rusty, and the momentum from the previous drive has been killed. And maybe UNLV now has that momentum because they went down and scored. And I would agree, if UNLV wants to win this game, those three keys that you presented there, the 2 picks, limiting Ashton Jeanty, whether that's 150 yards or just limiting his big explosive plays, which I think was your bigger key overall. And then just out rushing Boise State, or at least controlling the clock, I think is another thing that you're trying to hit at here for UNLV. If UNLV can do all 3 of those things and Boise State cannot stop them, it's going to be a very, very close matchup here. So let's get into the summary overall here. And so just to kind of summarize my own keys, special teams, got to be strong. Trust Maddox Madsen's arm. Passing game will be a big, important factor in this matchup. And then don't over-focus on any one element of Williams, because he'll beat you either way if you just focus in on one element area there. The Boise State defense has to have a balanced system overall in this matchup. And so moving on to our summary overall for Boise State versus UNLV, and then we'll end with those score predictions. So again, anybody watching live, remember, once the video is over and it's stopped, go in and put your score predictions in again so that we can so I can use those when afterwards for the score prediction challenge and shouting out the closest score prediction, because anything put in StreamYard, it just disappears afterwards. The live stuff I can't see afterwards. So moving on here to the score prediction, to the summary overall, and Bronco Nation, Rebel Nation, anybody watching, continue to put your comments in the comments below, and be part of this discussion with us. Before we go to the score prediction here, I'll go through and look at any final summarizations from Boise Bronco Nation or Rebel Nation here. Any final thoughts you guys have before we throw out those score predictions? But for Boise State versus UNLV, you're looking at 2 teams that are among the top in rushing defense in the country. I think that's going to be a big factor here. Obviously, like we said, UNLV, 99 yards. That's 9th overall. Boise State defense, 105.7 yard average allowed on the running game. That's 26th overall. And then you're also looking at 2 teams that are in the top 5 for rushing. I don't know if that's really been discussed as much, and maybe it's just because we still have another week until the matchup. But UNLV, 262 yards rushing per game. That you said everybody rushes that ball, quarterback, wide receivers, running backs. It does have at times a little bit of a service academy feel to it with everybody getting involved, but they're 5th in the country. The problem for UNLV, obviously, will be that Boise State is 3rd, coming in with 276.3 yards rushing, and that offensive line for Boise State is absolutely dominant. They do have a couple backs behind Jeanty that can also get it done as well. So this is going to be a very important matchup. I think when you look at UNLV, I called Hawaii a paper tiger last week, and I think I was wrong. I think that Hawaii was a little bit better than I expected them to be, but I also looked at who they played, and who they played was not very good overall. Even UCLA, who's their best matchup, not a strong program. And so I thought their statistics were maybe reflective of that. I don't think that UNLV is a paper tiger. I don't. I think they've played a very good Syracuse team. I think that they've played whether Houston and KU turn out to be world breakers or not, I think that they're still Power 4 teams with Power 4 roster, especially, KU, maybe not so much Houston as much with just being a newer Power 4 team. But both those teams are strong, and KU did a lot of good stuff last year as well. And then I was honestly more impressed with that Fresno State win. Just not necessarily that it was necessarily more impressive per se. I do think that Fresno State's a good team. They have a strong record, but just their circumstances to be able to come off of everything that was going on and all the noise in the ether and shut that out and bring out a quarterback that had not played at all coming into that game and to have the performance that they did. I think that I've underestimated UNLV again this year. I did that last season coming into the season preview, and I've done it again this season. I think that they've proved to be a much stronger team in all fronts than what was anticipated. However, I also don't think that they've seen a team like Boise State. I think those other programs they faced are good ones, at least Syracuse and Fresno, but they haven't seen Ashton-Genty. They haven't seen Boise State. And so I'm not as concerned by that 99-yard rushing defense number overall, because I think Boise State, maybe not statistically, but they face better run defenses than what UNLV has, and Ashton-Genty has been unstoppable against them. And I think that Boise State has seen teams like UNLV. I think that Oregon is a better team than UNLV. I think that Washington State is a team on the level or maybe better than UNLV, and Boise State's been able to win against them. And so I think that there's a little bit of a disadvantage here as far as what UNLV's experience has brought them to and what Boise State's experience has brought them to. And then you also have a UNLV team that they're going to have to come off of a very, very tough game versus Oregon State this week. They're not going to be coming into this one resting all their stars at halftime. Everyone's breezing through. They're going to have to come through a battle to then go play another battle in an environment that's not necessarily going to be the best home game environment. Again, I know they're adding extra seats for UNLV in this matchup, but that's not because people are coming to watch UNLV. They're adding extra seats because Vegas is turning out to watch Ashton-Genty. Boise State is coming into town. Boise State fans are coming down in droves. I have a ton of friends who live in Vegas that they're going to this game. And so it's going to be a majority of UNLV fans, but I think it's going to be a very strong road environment for Boise State as well. So you're not going to necessarily capitalize on the home field advantage per se that you would against maybe some other programs. And then just finally, on top of all of this, I think you have the element that Boise State's passing game is finally at a point where it is a major contributor to the offense, a main contributor, not just something that you are using as kind of a backup to the running game or using the running game to set it up, but a passing game that's proving that when the running game is stopped, when the offense is stopped on 4th and down or 2nd and long, the passing game can be a factor. And I think it's starting to hit its stride at the perfect time here. You look at that last game versus Hawaii, I thought the yardage overall was not bad, 200 plus yards passing. But if you have a ball that's not underthrown, maybe a few yards ahead of Camper, and then a pass by Camper that he actually catches, you have two 50-plus yard touchdowns in that game. And you're looking at a Maddox Madsen that throws for 250, 60 plus and four touchdowns over. I think he had 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns in that game. But he would have had a larger statistical performance. And I think Boise State has more that they can do in this passing game. And so I think a lot of things are starting to shift and stack in a way that is going to put Boise State at a perfect opportunity coming off of a bye week, coming off of a scare versus Hawaii, a game that definitely, I think, woke up the program a little bit coming into this UNLV game. I think you're going to see a Boise State team that's very motivated, Boise State team that's hitting its peak in every area, running game, passing game, special teams finally stepping up, and it's the perfect storm for UNLV. What are your thoughts on this matchup, kind of summarizing finally here before score predictions?
Yeah, so going to Oregon State, I know that Oregon State is not a world beater this year, but, Corvallis is a legit home field environment. They've got an awesome stadium up there. And I think that, and this is the big game on our schedule too. The fact that we are, going up on the road again against a tough program. I don't know if a tough team, but definitely a tough program. Well, their entire defense is injured. I was watching them against the Reno Community College. Boise State fans probably know that we do not call them by the name that they like to be called, because that's not who they are. Anyway. So I think that it's a big disadvantage for UNLV. And I don't think that there's going to be any sort of letdown feeling here. I think UNLV is going to go out and perform, not maybe at the very top of their level, but definitely pretty high up there. I think it will be a good game played by UNLV. Looking at Boise State this year, when I look at their schedule, when I look at, Georgia Southern, I didn't think that was I thought that was an incredible Ashton-Genty game and an incredible game by your offensive line. Everything else I thought was just kind of whatever. Obviously, Oregon, I thought was kind of just a perfect storm where Boise State had great opportunities to fire on all cylinders, and Genty had great opportunities. And I was really rooting for you guys in that game. I think that Washington State game was very impressive. I don't really, I know that 60-30 versus whatever we won 50-36 by Utah State. I don't really see a ton of difference in how we played those two games. I think UNLV is going to have a really tough time down in Hawaii too. So I think that the teams, I think that this game has a chance to be very close. And I would not, obviously Vegas is going to favor Boise State. And I think that is probably the correct line decision to do. And the home field environment, I guess I'll touch on that too a little bit. Vegas is an awesome place to travel to. It just is. It's a great hub. It's people are going to come down. Boise State, I took the flight between Boise and Vegas many times. And so I know that flight's going to be full. I wonder if BJ is going to do that Taco Bell bus again that he did last year, which I thought was pretty funny. I watch Bronco News now. I watch BJ basically every day too. So just so you guys know, I do actually follow and really pay attention to Boise State. Because they are my second team, but it's just really kind of awkward now that we're like kind of competing with you guys a little bit. It's really awkward for me because I really want you guys to do well. And so overall, coming into this game, I'm nervous. Got to be honest, I'm nervous about it. I think UNLV has a chance, but this is the game for all the marbles. Are we going to prove that we're a legitimate kind of group of five team, or are we going to hope for a rematch in the conference championship? Because that's what it comes down to. Those are the two options.
Yeah, I think the point on the Utah State game, I mean, I don't know if you compare broad across the board there. I think it did give me a little bit more confidence for this matchup, considering that Boise State pulled their stars at halftime, except for one drive when they came back in and then went back out again. Ashley Jetty didn't play at any point. 62-30, whereas, Utah State, I know it wasn't every single person, but you still got your starting quarterback, you still got your starting offensive line, you still got, most of your wide receivers out there, and 50-34. And that's, Utah State giving an effort in the second half there. I don't know.
It was on the road.
It was on the road. Yeah, sure. That's fair. I'll give you that too. So I'm not going to say that's going to be a straight across comparison. You can look at that overall, but it is a good UNLV team and a good Boise State team, and probably I'm going to say definitely hands down the best UNLV team we've ever played. So if there was ever an opportunity for UNLV to go out and get that win, it would be this one. Before we get to score predictions here, just read off a couple of quick comments that have come in, just kind of summarizing this match, final thoughts overall. Cam here saying that on your point with interceptions, I think that the turnovers, having to force turnovers is going to be big. I would agree with that. I think Boise State, they haven't been great at forcing turnovers this season. They've been great, of course, with the sacks. Was it 28 plus sacks? If I can just scan down here, look at this, the number 29 sacks overall, leading the country in that number. Their pass deflections haven't been bad. I mean, pretty good overall in that number as well. 23 pass deflections on the season, but only the one pick overall this year. And there's been some moments when they've come really, really close. I mean, last week versus Hawaii, they had a deflection that was almost picked. Irby almost brought that one back. And then there was another moment there in the fourth quarter where McCoy had a ball in his hands and just ended up missing it as well. And so they're getting closer. I think that's an important factor as well. They definitely need to turnovers would be a big key to Boise State being able to not just win this game, but do it dominantly. Cam had another point here about Boise State's rushing offense and UNLV as well. It's going to be a fun one, I think. I think it's going to be a lot of grind up the clock on both sides. And then kind of finally looking here before we get to the score predictions here, we got Brian. Brian just saying that Boise State opens with offense getting UNLV. I think it's going to be an exciting matchup, so giving his score prediction there. So that leads us, I think, perfectly into our score predictions. And you know what? You're the guest. I'll let you lead off on this one. We've been Boise State first, everything else so far. So I will let you lead off with your score prediction here for Boise State versus UNLV.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a really high-scoring game. I'm not 100% sure what the over is going to be for points. The over-under is going to be for total points, but I would probably guess over on it, honestly. I will say that if you listen to my podcast next week, I will not change who I think the winner is going to be. I may tighten the score if I have, because we're going to play a huge game against Oregon State. I feel like that's another huge piece of evidence or information about this team. So I do reserve the right to change what I think the score is actually going to be, though I will not change who I think the winner is going to be. I will not pick UNLV to beat Boise State unless I see UNLV beat Boise State. Not going to do it. It's kind of like San Diego State, UNLV, San Diego State with basketball. Sometimes a team has your number. Sometimes a team just exudes a level of confidence in playing you. And that's not to say UNLV can't win this game, but I think that if I want to pick them, I got to see them beat Boise State first. And I have never in my life seen them beat Boise State. They have not beaten Boise State in my lifetime. So high-scoring game. Something along the lines, again, I don't really care about exact point margins. I care more about score ranges and then difference between the two teams. Something along the lines of 44-31. So I think a 13-point victory for Boise State. I just don't think UNLV is quite ready. And I think Hodge Malik Williams, something that you guys have brought up in the chat that maybe we didn't talk about yet, is Boise State's very good at getting to the quarterback. I'm not sure that Hodge Malik Williams is going to handle that pressure as well as we hope. Don't know if it's going to end up in a ton of interceptions, but I have Boise State winning a comfortable game, doing the over. And I try and be fair in my analysis. As a fan, I try and be level-headed and objective. Even though I completely fail all the time, but that is where I see the game going. A 13-point victory. Boise in the 40s, UNLV in the 30s.
I think that's absolutely fair. Boise State, I am going to predict a win on this one as well. And I think that until the fourth quarter, I think it's going to be pretty close to your score prediction. But Boise State has been a strong fourth quarters team all season. Part of it is just that you can only stop Ashton Jeanty for so long. Eventually, he's going to wear you down. But I think that, Dirk Cutter, obviously, with his massive wealth of experience, is just great at adjustments. He knows when to save certain things. And Boise State has been playing their best football in the fourth quarter here. And so I think that, majority of this game, third quarter, reaching into the edge of the fourth quarter, it's going to be a 2-possession or less game. I think you could definitely see at times there UNLV, maybe UNLV trading scores at a certain point. But I do think that in the final quarter there, Boise State does pull away. Ashton Jeanty has a big player. Maybe we have a big passing down. Maybe we finally force a turnover, like some people have alluded to as well so far. So my final score prediction for this one, I think, is going to be somewhat similar to what we saw versus, Washington State. I think we're going to see 58-37. I think Boise State, they've been really good at putting those games in the 50s. The passing game opening up with those opportunities. Again, I think, like you said already, I think Maddox Madsen could have one of his best games. I don't think they're going to stop Ashton Jeanty. I think it's going to be a shootout back and forth. But then eventually, Eric Chenander, Spencer Danielson, they'll make the adjustments they need to stop UNLV on defense. And I think that Boise State's just going to get harder to stop as the game rolls through. So my final score prediction for this one, 58-37, throwing out a couple of Bronco Nation score predictions here. And again, reminder, please put those in at the end. When the video stops, put those score predictions in. Again, I want these to all count for the final score prediction challenge and the shout out. But just to throw out a couple that have been so gracious to participate with us today, we got Idaho Hermit Photography here, 42-17. So a little bit closer to what you're predicting there, at least with the Boise State offensive score. Greg Myers, 42-33, almost identical actually to what you'd predicted there. Joshua, 37-31, Boise State for the win, 1-possession game. And don't get me wrong, just because I'm predicting a large win here, 58-37, to do my quick math here, public math, 3-possession win, 3-score win, which has been the trend for Boise State since 1977. Even though I that's what I'm predicting, I would not be shocked if this game was close, if this game came down to a final drive, if this game went into overtime. I mean, God forbid, don't like going into overtime in the state of Nevada. But if that was to happen, I mean, I would not be incredibly shocked by that. I think that these close score predictions are accurate. Bill L., incredible supporter of the channel. He's commented almost every single video that I've done. Fantastic friend there to be able to participate all the time. Love seeing his comments. He says, Boise State 31, UNLV 27. Dune here, 42-28. We're almost done wrapping up here. Joshua throwing out 38-31. 38-31. I guess so. Actually, corrected his score prediction there. I guess we'll count that one. 38-31. Stephen Kumpf here, 42-28, and then the final one we're going to throw out here as well. Ricky Wickham, 37-24. So Boise State, UNLV, this has been a great preview. Thanks so much, everybody, for participating all the way through live. Thanks, everybody, for watching all the way through for the recorded viewership. Let us know your thoughts. Again, score predictions in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts on this matchup, and I'm going to go through and again and engage with every person, or try to at least, like I do in every single video. So thanks so much for coming on. Alex, this has been... Jason. Sorry, my bad. Jason, thanks so much, Jason, for coming on and participating in this. Everybody, make sure you check out his stuff. Obviously, he's got a great analytical perspective He does a great job of presenting his views here for the UNLV matchups. Obviously, he'll be doing his own preview for Boise State versus UNLV. Going to be very informative. Again, he's very, very fair overall in his perspective, not like some of the other UNLV fans we participated on Twitter, Bronco Nation. So thanks so much for being here, Jason, all the way through to the end. Make sure everyone that you go through and you like and subscribe, obviously, to this channel, but also go check out Jason's as well. Thanks everybody for watching all the way through to the end. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!